So welcome back, everybody. Good morning. I'm going to say a few words for people who might be joining us live stream who haven't been here before, just to make sure that people know what's going on. So we're in day 2 of our conference on the media and democracy in Africa. We had a great start yesterday with some fantastic panels and a great keynote address, and we have a full day today. So I just want to briefly highlight the schedule for the day. We're starting with a roundtable on building collaboration between media and the academy. Then we have a brief coffee break. And then at 10:45, we resume with a roundtable on financing independent media. And then we have a keynote address at lunch by Mohammed. And so for the keynote address, for those of you who are in the room, lunch will be served outside the hall here, and we can eat it in the room as we listen to the talk. And then in the afternoon, we have a panel on media, new technology, and artificial intelligence. And then after another coffee break, finally, we conclude with a roundtable on the future of media and democracy in Africa. So our first panel this morning, building collaboration between media and the academy. I want to introduce the panelists. I'm going to ask them to come up and sit here. But I want to tell you a little bit about the panel. We sent about the roundtable, sorry. We've been calling some things panels and some things roundtables. And in the panels, the idea is that people do a short presentation utilizing their own research and experience to shed light on the topic, and then we open it up for questions and discussion. Some people sometimes have PowerPoints and things like that. In the roundtables, we've just prompted people with a series of questions, asked them to speak for 5 or 7 minutes about however they want to about those prompts. And then we'll open it up for interactive questions and discussion. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the prompts for the roundtable that we're going to do now on media, collaboration between media and the academy. So what our roundtable participants received as kind of questions from me, because I'm moderating the session, about this roundtable are: what has been your experience with regard to collaboration between media and the academy? In your experience, what are the primary benefits of such collaboration? What are the principal challenges? And how might we do it better? And so that was just the broad overview of what people are supposed to consider. So I'm going to ask the panelists to come, the participants to come up as I introduce them. Ann Wallis. Ann is Associate Professor in the Department of Epidemiology and Public Health and the Director of the MPH in Global Maternal and Child Health at the School of Public Health and Information Sciences at the University of Louisville. And then we're supposed to have Pamela Amunazo, who's the BBC correspondent in the DRC. I don't know if she's joined us. I don't think so. We've had some confusion over time zones and things and so on. Maybe she'll join us in the middle. If she does, we'll ask her to say what she wants to say. And then we have Nwenna Kai Gates, Assistant Professor at the Community College of Philadelphia. And finally, Sharif Bojang, the Deputy Political Editor of the Africa Report. And I was, he probably thought I was joking, but I wasn't. Yesterday, when I was talking to Sharif after the afternoon sessions, I told him that he had made an allusion to the fact that his higher education was in life and experience in the world of media and journalism, and that this was the first time that he'd been in an academic setting like this. And he was pleased to be here, but wanted to remind us all of the benefits of a life education and what you can learn from it that you can't get in the university, which is very well taken. But I told him at the reception afterwards that we have actually a position in the academy called Professor of the Practice. And I think he would make a great professor of the practice. And I just want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that he's accomplished without a bachelor's degree from Brown or anywhere else. So he's an award-winning Gambian print, radio, TV, and social media online journalist, blogger, and communications consultant. He was the former president of the Gambian Press Union, and he spent a decade serving as foreign correspondent for the English service of Radio France International, Radio Netherlands, West Africa Democracy Radio. He worked in West Africa as a stringer for The Guardian UK, the London-based Pan-African magazine The New African, Chinese news agency, Al Jazeera, France 24, Africa 24 TV. Among the biggest highlights of his journalism career is his coverage of the Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone, which resulted in his nomination for a finalist of the 2015 CNN African Journalist of the Year Award. He was also a finalist in the 2012 Fitzgerald Prize for Young African Journalists, becoming the second most prominent young African journalist by Reuters. In 2011, for Radio for Peacebuilding Africa Award organized by in Rwanda by the Washington-based Search for Common Grounds, Sharif won the Gender Award for his radio documentary on the prevalence of rape in Senegal. So this is I'm just highlighting this because here we are about to embark on a session about collaboration between the media and the academy. And I think it's important, since we're in an academic setting, to remind ourselves of what people who aren't in the academy bring to this project. So without further ado, I'm going to ask in the order of Anne, Nwenna, Pamela, if she's here, and then finally Sharif, to make their 5 to 7 minute remarks. And then I'll ask a couple questions and then we'll open it up to the audience. Okay, so Anne.
Okay. I wanted to open with something that kept coming up yesterday and was kind of an atmospheric feeling that don't give up on America yet. Just, we're not done. This is 3 months into a really bad administration. We are fighting back. There is constitutional restraints on this man. So I just wanted to, I'm an eternal optimist, maybe to my own detriment, but really, we can do this. I come from an academic setting in public health that is supposed to be, by definition, public. But in departments of epidemiology, we tend to be really insular. And it gets on my nerves, I'll be honest, that, my colleagues publish on what they find from large data sets or longitudinal studies on really some obscure topics. Or things that I would actually argue they're getting wrong from the data. And they publish in a journal, and that's the end of it, a scientific journal that is not widely read. So I don't think that we do a good job of accessing the media, and maybe vice versa. And I think, a conference like this is a good start. One of the things that really changed my world in terms of building collaboration was when I first met Cherno, Dr. Ba. This was during the regime change in 2016 in the Gambia, and I was there through all of that. And one of my favorite bookstores, Timbuktu, had a copy of Cherno's book on Ebola. And it was kind of life-changing because he wrote a book that I wish I'd written. It's good field epidemiology, and it really questions what the real epidemiologists were doing in very important ways. I mean, he really called them out. And it was after that that we started collaborating, and he asked me to work with him on Africanist. And I'm sort of the health editor, and we work together a lot. And that's been where I've been able to find some voice. And as you know, his work and the work of the Africanist is shared in newspapers across Africa. So that's been really important to me, and it has kind of been an opening a window for me and my work. I think in our best iteration, and this is kind of lame too, is that when we publish a scientific article, the first author is supposed to be prepared to speak to the press on it. But we rarely get the call unless it's in the Lancet or it's some totally world-shattering news. So I would ask, the media to reach out. And I know that it's hard because these academic journals are really stuck in PubMed, and it's not easy to get access to them unless you have university access. So I think that is something that we need to think about. I've also I'm really interested in applied epidemiology. I'm interested in this praxis, where science meets practicality or practice. And in this part of my life, I'm really interested in writing books and thinking about theory and thought pieces about how does this work? How do we take what we know or what we think we know and put it into actual practice in the real world in communities globally? And finally, the other thing I've done that gets some traction sometimes is I'm active on social media. So I use Threads. I got rid of X when Musk bought it. I won't use that platform. I use Threads, which admittedly is owned by Zuckerberg, but I find it to be a much friendlier place. So on Threads, I am at Badass Epiprof. Because I overheard one day I overheard students talking about me and they said, she's really badass. And I'm like, I'll take that. And then I have a blog called Barefoot Epidemiologist that admittedly I don't update nearly often enough, but perhaps I'll try to do that more because I really think that epidemiology should be barefoot. We have to go to the places. I don't stay in 5-star hotels when I'm traveling around the world. On my last trip to the Gambia is the first time I've ever stayed in a hotel there. And I felt so disconnected. I've always stayed on university property or actually, in a community, a neighborhood. And I spend as much time there as possible because how do we know anything, whether it's from a public health standpoint or an anthropology standpoint or a journalist standpoint, unless we're barefoot, so that's what I have. Oh, and I was thinking about also some of the things I post about on Threads are like the measles epidemic. We eliminated measles in the US in 2003, and now it's back and with a vengeance because people are not vaccinating. And this is a real problem where people aren't believing science. They're not believing journalists. They're not believing, the legacy papers. I've posted on USAID and on how, for example, the last remnants of USAID were a few people on the ground in Myanmar after the earthquake a couple of weeks ago. They were summarily recalled this past week. And that's tragic in the like the Greek tragic sense of the word. And then some other things, but I'll leave that because those are most pertinent here. So what I've got.
Hello, everyone. I guess I don't have to be too close. So my name is Nwenna Kai-Gates, and I'm an assistant professor at Community College of Philadelphia. Wanted to just talk a little bit about what I teach, where I teach in the college I teach at, and the student demographics. So it's a community college in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a very working class, blue collar city. Many of our students are the products of the Philadelphia public school system. And we have a very diverse student population. So we have very traditional college students, but we also have very non-traditional college students, adult learners, students who have been out of the school system for decades. It's racially and ethnically diverse. It's diverse in, economically. We have a lot of students who are children of immigrants themselves, and also undocumented students as well. So I teach in the English and the Black Studies department, and the Black Studies department is fairly new. It's about maybe 4 or 5 professors who are in that department. I teach writing classes, public speaking, literature classes. I'm actually 2 professors there that teach African literature, and including myself. And I teach a contemporary Black cinema class for the Black Studies department. So just wanted to give a little bit of information about myself because it kind of informs some of my, answers and approaches to the questions. But, when Cherno and I met at Community College of Philadelphia. So it was nice to see Cherno again and get this invitation because we haven't seen each other in such a long time. I invited Cherno to my writing class. We were reading the book A Long Way Gone by Ishmael Bia, a Sierra Leonean novelist. And he came to the class to give some background information about the war and neocolonialism and West African politics and that sort of thing. So that is how our friendship started. And then when he invited me to the conference, I was like, well, Cherno, I'm not a journalist, but it was interesting because yesterday hearing the panelists and seeing all the presentations and I was just like, oh yeah, I teach a lot of these different things in my classes. And so things are just really like connecting. So something I wanted to talk a little bit about my sort of collaboration with media is I do a number of different things. In addition to teaching, I'm a labor organizer and an activist. I'm a union leader at the college where I teach. And we just actually settled a contract after 14 months of a contract negotiation. We got unprecedented wages, first time 4-week parental leave, and a number of other wins that were documented a lot through the media. But one of the things that we did, we worked closely with the media. We worked closely with the media to not just galvanize our members and our faculty and staff, but also our students. And it was one of the first times in us doing a contract campaign that we actually got our students on board with us to the point where they actually also are now starting a union for themselves. I also started a YouTube channel called Diaspora Connections, and that was just out of a very deeply personal vision that I have to find ways to connect African people throughout the diaspora. As an African Americans have a very weird and strange relationship with Africans on the continent. And so it was a way to have conversations with people about the continent and how we can sort of dismantle some of these very negative narratives that we have about each other. And I could, that's a whole other conversation. And then through the course that I teach at CCP called Contemporary Black Cinema, I co-created a TV show on YouTube with the TV station that we have at CCP called Cinema Bites. And myself and another professor, we analyzed different Black films from a socio-political, aesthetic, and economic standpoint and lens. And I also write for a website called medium.com, which is a very open source writing platform for writers to get their work out. In terms of social media, I'm not great at social media, so I don't really dive too much into that. There were so many other things I probably had to say about that. But and I also participate in, it brings me back to you, Cherno. At CCP, we have an international studies program. We have International Week, and we invite speakers to come to speak on different topics that impact different global issues. And there's been a couple of times I've participated in, we call it COIL Exchange, COIL, COIL, stands for Collaborative Online Learning, Collaborative Online International Learning Exchange. And I did that exchange with Pretoria University, a university in South Africa, with a professor where we looked at Blaxploitation films. So the Blaxploitation film genre is definitely a genre that Black Americans are very familiar with, but it's also a genre in South Africa as well. There's some similarities and some differences in them, but there was a conversation between one of the classes at Pretoria University and my class where we looked at South African Blaxploitation films and then Blaxploitation films in the United States. So that was also something that we, collaborated on and did that through new media, through a YouTube channel. And yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, so actually what I love the most about this is I've always been passionate about scholars, academics, and their work, and that will reflect on my writings and my radio broadcasts, either at West Africa Democracy Radio or my radio programs in various international radio stations. I featured a lot of, especially one-on-one interview programs, a lot of academics, because I've always been curious and I've always been interested in telling their stories in a very simple way that can be accessible to anyone, regardless of your academic credentials. So that's why this is, this is important. So this conversation, it's timely, it's important, and these are the reasons why I feel this conversation is important. First, us as journalists, members of the media fraternity, and academics have both served the public, or do both serve the public good, yet often we operate in silos. In an era of misinformation and declining trust in institutions, both us, the demand for credible evidence-based reporting is more urgent now than ever before, especially in this country at this time. So collaboration between us, journalists and researchers, the academics, enhances both the dissemination of research and quality of journalism. So the shared goal is to create, for both of us, informed and then engaged societies. So the key collaboration opportunities between media and academy, research translation, turning academic work into accessible storytelling. So oftentimes, when the scholars and researchers come up with their life-changing research works, very important, it helps change policies, but oftentimes they like, especially with the abstracts and everything, it's in a language that is not easily understood. It requires special kind of intelligence to understand. And oftentimes when researchers, top scholars, academics, when you speak in tongues, and that's not understood. So I think this collaboration is not enough to do research, to come up with this life-changing research. How do you get the message to the common person? How do you make the message accessible and also understandable, so that anybody can read this message, anybody can consume this message, and everyone can understand this message? Then expert commentary. I love using researchers, featuring them, their comments and their thoughts in my work every time. So I have a story to tell. You have the expertise to consolidate my story. So our collaboration, journalists using researchers to chip in on issues of their expertise, I think that's always important. And I've always loved featuring. At the end of this presentation, I will tell you some of the works that I've been doing with academics, with researchers, and with professors. Then joint information, data journalism powered by academic partnerships. We've had discussions from Chairman and others yesterday about investigative work. And imagine a journalist doing investigative work, depending on whatever, or regardless of whatever topic you're working on, and having to work with academics, because now data is everything. When you have statistics, when you have the data, and then you have the evidence to back up whatever you're investigating. I think that helps to empower your story. That helps to broaden the success of your story. And then this method, the collaboration between media and academia, this has been proven, right? It was tested, it has been tested, and it was successful. It has been successful. And first is what fascinates me the most. The project is the Reuters and Oxford. And I'm a beneficiary of that, the Reuters Oxford Climate Fellowship. So Reuters have always worked with Oxford, bringing academics and journalists together, the same room, to have discussion, to help policy changes, reforms, and to help move the world. Then you have The Conversation, a non-profit platform where scholars write articles edited by journalists for public consumption. This is a model that has been working. Then university media labs in many parts of the world where you have supporting innovation in data visualization, podcasting, and investigative work. Then in Dakar, you have the CODESRIA, the Council for Development of Social Science Research in Africa. They often partner with journalists for public forums and dissemination of social science research. So CODESRIA has been working with journalists across Africa to first, because I think it's among the top organizations on the continent that regularly come up with research, huge research products, and they've always used journalists to simplify those research contents of their research, but also to disseminate the information. So the challenge is, despite the success of Reuters, CODESRIA, and others that I mentioned, there are challenges that we both together need to overcome. Different timelines. Journalists work fast, academics publish slowly because most of the time it's not tight deadline like us. So how do we merge these two, putting into consideration the need for due diligence, the need for slow pace of academic work, and our quest to be the breakers of news. That is always there, and I hope we can discuss this further. Then the language barrier, academic jargons. And oftentimes it's not because they are wrong, but I can understand academics. You work so hard for your degrees. When you get to that doctorate, especially, you need those academic bravado, bragging rights. So you have to use these jargons so people know that you are up there. For us, it's just clarity, simple language, no need for bravado, no need for anything, just for people to understand. And then there is mistrust. And this is experience. From experience, I have known a lot of time where journalists, even to quote an academic who seemed to be close to a political power base, who seemed to be close to a political party, then the people will come up with this. They say, he might be partisan, he's close to this group or that group. Then that affects your trust in using that person. And also the other side of the divide, you have academics, for example, that will have the same hesitation about a publication or a journalist because they feel you belong to that section or you. So the case of Cherno, you'll have a lot of journalists in Sierra Leone who will want to write about or who are writing or investigating about historical perspective of anything, and the best person to contact for comments will be Cherno, but because they will, as he said, to them, he is politician who is not close to the government or something, so that may affect their judgment. And then the issue of funding and sustainability for joint projects. Sometimes when you want to go for major reports, shared interests, shared goals, you need, especially investigative work, you need funding for it. And these have always been a problem, especially now in these trying times, not just in the US, but across the world. So those are all challenges that both of us need to discuss and then see way around them. Then the solutions, some of the solutions and strategies, the need to establish clear communication channels and shared goals, co-create editorial calendars around policy milestones, elections or reports. So it's not just enough for journalists to collaborate and then work with academics, but also the need for discussion. So there is a calendar around major issues of significance, of mutual interest. Then develop the issue of developing university media liaison roles or campuses. I think some university campuses already have this. In that way, we can have academics, members, and then especially the students, media students, can prepare, and it can help them enhance their knowledge and their scope of understanding even before they graduate. Then the issue of funding, again, from donors who value cross-sector collaboration. I know the donor issue, the funding issue is a problem now across the world, but then, yeah, this is something that can work for both of us. And then finally, because of my passion for work of scholars and academics, 2024, I took up an initiative because I interviewed a lot of professors all over, especially Africans who are in the US. I started the Africa Report. It was a discussion back and forth. I need to justify why the questions from my colleagues and from my bosses is like, is it going to attract people? So, because normally when you want to do this, 10 scholars out of probably hundreds of thousands, or maybe over 1 million, you need a whole committee to sit, come up with all these criteria. What do we do and stuff? But I was able to defend it. We don't need rocket science. We don't need to discuss. We don't need a conference just to come. All we have to do, social media is there, people are there, we've just seen people. It's not like the people we're going to pick are the best. I mean, who can do that? Nobody, no preparation or no committee can prepare you for that. But then I will make sure that the people that we feature, nobody is going to question them. You can say, what about somebody else? It's not there, but you cannot say, and so far we've not had that someone is there and is not supposed to be there. Then 2024, I told them I wanted to start this to a lineup of 10 African scholars whose works are compelling, probably not the best, but they have compelling work, exciting work, and tremendously been contributing to especially discuss, across Africa. Then we started with this is the 2024 version, from Oxford to a lot of Ivy Leagues to Zimbabwe, to Kenya, South Africa, Senegal, Ghana. And what stood out for me was, and for my colleagues, is I think within a week, we were at like 13 million on Twitter. We had all the institutions. I knew it might go big because people who are featured, I spoke to them back and forth. I contacted a lot of people. Let me say this. I had doubts about some works. Can I say this and stuff? And decided we're going to go for these 10. And their institutions retweeted, their institutions wrote their countries across media, across these countries, the media, newspapers published extensively about it. And we went millions and millions and millions. Then we took a decision at the Africa Report that take ownership of this. And this year's one was even better. And you can see that in each of them, 2024 had six women and 4 men. This one as well, 2025, the same thing. And that is because genuinely, I see myself as a feminist. So that always affects, whatever I do. It makes impact on what I do. When it comes to that, I tend to look more for women. And these are not just because they are women. So again, I don't want my visa canceled, but these are not DEI. These are real, genuine people who deserve to be here, and I tend to, I look forward to the 2026 edition, and hopefully, hopefully the next edition we will have some great people from Brown University. So thank you very much.
Let's thank all the participants. I'm going to come up and moderate the discussion. I was curious how the four, in the 2025 edition, there were 6 people on the cover, how the 4 who didn't make the cover felt today.
Yeah.
So great presentations. I want to just start off the discussion by making a couple of quick comments and maybe asking a question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So first of all, I mean, this is a real issue, I think, for both media and the academy. I mean, I sit in the academy, so it feels like a bigger issue in the academy because we're the ones who don't know how to communicate beyond our own ivory tower insular walls. But I think it's an issue for, as you've all pointed out, it's an issue for the media as well. In part because if we believe in the academy and scholarship and research and so on, there ought to be things that we know and learn and can provide that enhance the value, the quality, the truth of what the media does. I mean, it strikes me that an issue that is perhaps common across the two is audience, right? So while the media is generally much better at communicating with broader audiences than the academy is, I would argue that all of you still face issues of audience, meaning that reaching the actual grassroots is really hard, right? I mean, I would argue that even among you who are way better at reaching the grassroots than we are in the academy, you still struggle to reach the grassroots. I mean, most of the people who are accessing your certainly print media, they're literate. That's just a fraction of the population, and many of the people that you're trying to reach, you're. I mean, I guess that's a question I have. I'll put that to Sharif and to others in the audience. I mean, who is your audience, right? I mean, who are you trying to reach? Are you trying to reach the absolute grassroots? Are you trying to reach opinion leaders? Are you trying to change things at the political level? And does that happen by reaching the grassroots, or does that happen by reaching higher levels of the audiences that you're trying to that you want to influence and have an impact on? So audience, it seems to me, is a big question. And then in this relationship between the academy and the media, where does the onus lie? I mean, I think it lies on both sides. And that's a question I would ask the panelists to respond to. Like, from your perspective, if you're in the media, where does the onus on you lie? Like, what is it that you can do, the media can do? And those of us in the academy, how does the onus lie in us? Like, what can we do? And you've sketched already beginning answers to that question, but I'd like to hear more. Cherno is teaching, so this is an interesting one about how one can, from an academic point of view, how one can begin to do this better, right? So for the course that Cherno is teaching for the Watson Institute, for Brown University's undergraduate population, it's the role of media in state formation, in colonial state formation, post-colonial state formation in Africa. And he has a small number of students who decided to take the class. He's also teaching a summer course for pre-college students, for high school students, where he had kind of total liberty to do whatever he wanted to do. And he invented a course called investigative journalism, right? And so it's going to be a very hands-on 2-week course this summer. The Brown course, I mean, there are probably a whole host of reasons, but the Brown course enrolled like half a dozen students or something like that. The summer course on investigative journalism had a cap at 18 and it filled like right away, right? So, and I think, to me, that signals that there's a way in which we design and pitch the work we do in the academy that doesn't reach the audiences. Like why are there only 5 or 6 students in Cherno's class? Well, part of it is it's his first year here. No one knew who he was. Part of it was that there's lots of courses that students can choose from. But I think also part of it was that he was, partly by me, he was pushed to kind of design a course that would appeal to a high level audience, right? And that high level audience, ironically, discourages people from taking a course, right? Like my guess is if he did the investigative journalist class at Watson, he would have gotten a lot of Brown undergraduates as well. But the pitch was different for the two audiences, right? And the pitch for the high school students was allowed to be more accessible. The pitch to the Brown undergraduates was presumed to be more highfalutin, more elite or something like that, right? And so that missed opportunity, I would say, right, on the academic side. So it's maybe reflecting on that a bit. And then the last thing I want to say, and this is something I would also want the panelists to comment on. I mean, it seems to me that maybe one of the things we could do at Brown as an outcome of this conference, and in the moment where we're about to transition from an Institute for International and Public Affairs to a School of International and Public Affairs, and the transition from an institute to a school, there was a lot of debate in the faculty. Are they going to call it a School of Public Policy? And many of us were worried about that, because where would the international part go? And where would the kind of history, anthropology, and so on go? If it's a public policy school, in the United States, public policy tends to veer toward American, veer toward domestic, tends to be dominated by economists and political scientists. And so many of us were relieved when they kept the name, the school is going to be the Watson School for International and Public Affairs. But the subtext of the whole thing is that policy is going to be a big deal. And those of us who want area studies, African studies, disciplines besides economics and anthropology to feature in the school, we're looking for ways to take advantage of a policy school and still be relevant in it. And it strikes me that one of the things that we could do as an outcome of this conference is to think seriously, when there's a new dean appointed and the school launches in July, to think seriously about creating some kind of program like the ones that Sharif outlined that exist at other places, where the idea would be to have an institutional spot at the school to grapple with these questions about the relationship between the media and academia. In academia, there's like, I'm an anthropologist, so we a lot of us try to engage in what we call public anthropology or public scholarship. Like, public scholarship is a recognizable term in academia, and what public scholarship means is trying to make your work more accessible to wider audiences. But the boundary is much narrower than actually collaborating with journalists in the media, right? I mean, that's a different enterprise. So lots of us are committed to public scholarship. Basically, it's like reading you write your article, you write your book, and then you read through it and say, okay, where's the jargon? Let me clean it up. Let me make it more accessible. But it's not crossing the boundary or creating a partnership between the academy and the media. That, it seems to me, needs its own program, its own efforts, its own funding, obviously. And so I would just be curious from the panelists to hear, like, if we were to contemplate doing something like that here, like, what would you recommend? What should we be paying attention to? What would be the parameters for doing something like that successfully? And I would argue, just as a starting point, bringing someone in as a professor of the practice to spend a year helping us figure that out would be one step to take. So I'm going to stop there. And I've highlighted a bunch of things, but I mean, I think this question, the two things I will go back to and point to and ask you guys to maybe comment on, and then we'll open it up to the audience. One is this question of audience. Like, are there more similarities? One way of putting the question is, are there more similarities in the challenges we face about who our audiences are between academia and the media than we normally acknowledge, right? And for those of you in the media, how do you grapple with who your audience is? And then the second one is these institutional mechanisms that we might forge to create more collaboration between the media and the academy. And if I said, what should we do at Brown if we want to do this well? Like, what would be the things that come to mind? Like how should we start this? What should we be thinking about? How about we go about it? So, thanks a lot.
I can. So on the question of audience targets, this is a debate that has been going on even in media houses as to who the followers are, but also who the targets are, and depending on what you do, the form of media, the mode of media. I will say, for example, at the Africa Report, I don't see, because first of all, it's paywall. So most of the time when I write about the Gambia, I don't expect my aunts and uncles in the village to read what I do, because they can only read. If they can read, they can only read the headline and then the lead. That's it. Then they will have to pay. And when it comes to that, especially in a developing world, people will have to, even if it is $3, people will have to decide whether to use the $3 to put food on the table or to read a news article. So with that, when I write for the Africa Report, I'm not targeting an unemployed young person. And that shows not just because the article, the stories that I write or that we publish are not accessible to them because of the paywall, but I also have that at the back of my mind that I'm targeting the kind of elitists, and also the employed, the university professors, the doctors, the bankers, and stuff. So but that will be completely different if I am writing for a local newspaper in the Gambia, because then I have at the back of my mind that everything that I write will be translated to everybody in the village, because the radio stations, local radio stations, they call it newspaper review, but it's not review, it's direct translation. So everything is directly translated into local languages for consumption by everybody. And this is across Africa. You see this trend all the time. So everybody's got access to the newspapers, local national newspapers through radio, and then also when you work for radio, that will be different from, because anybody could have a radio station. All you have to do is to have your own radio set. If it is not online, if it is traditional radio, you have your radio set, and then you listen to whatever is there. But I know even recently we've had this discussion in one of our meetings, editorial meetings, as to, because the statistics, every morning we go through the stats, how many hits, readers, subscribers, and stuff, and then you tend to realize that all the algorithms point to, let's say, people, expatriate community, if it's in Africa, but more so people, because when you have a story that has to do with finances, with banking and stuff, you have more subscribers and stuff. So that shows you that those are the kind of people who access it. But then I guess it will be the same with academics, because if you do, I've seen quite often, you go to, I mentioned Codestria, I mentioned, you go to a lot of, especially the research centers in Africa, different research centers, you have a whole room full of books, full of leaflets, research products that have been sitting there. And then I know I had, when I was at the Press Union Gambia, I had collaboration. I mean, we discussed some modalities and came up with a collaboration between the Gambia Press Union and Codestria, where their research work, all these books, cartons full of books, to take it to the library, the Gambia Press Union. But then you go there and then you realize that people are not reading these works, because I think the most important thing, or the main thing, is that they are not simplified. People want to read novels and stuff. But what also people are doing now, I think podcasts change the game, both for us in the media and for the academic, because now myself, I read less, and then I listen to podcasts. I go for shower, my phone is on. Everybody, you use podcast. It has become the new trend now, where you can reach, of course, you're not going to reach everybody, but you can reach broader audience, and then especially the ones that are not monetized. But even with that, you can say, for example, one of my most favorite podcasts would be The Rest is Politics, Anthony Scaramucci and and Kathy K. I mean, I want to, that has to do also with my political lining, where you listen to that, you know where I'm leaning towards. So I think those are the challenges. I would hope that there will be a media outlet that targets everybody and whose audiences are everybody, regardless of where you are, your geographical location, your academic credentials, or your status. But I think now that's very difficult, and I'm not sure there is any that touch on everybody.
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of piggyback for what you were saying about people listening more and not maybe reading as much. Because again, I teach at a community college. I'm teaching students who are the products of a Philadelphia public school system. And I'm teaching students who are struggling with reading and definitely struggling with writing. And so I teach a research paper writing class. And one thing I used to require my students to do was to only use scholarly, peer-reviewed work to support their arguments, to support their, whatever inquiry they were making. And I had a lot of pushback from students because of that, because the language, the content was very inaccessible for them. And so, I then just started to require that they use scholarly and non-scholarly, more popular sources to support their arguments. But I'm always, I guess, wondering, we want to serve our audience, our audiences as media practitioners and also as, academics. But I'm also wondering if we, should push back on some of this as well, because I do think that the writing or the reading capacities of some of my students is different than what it was maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And I've been teaching in the academy for about 15 years with the prevalence of AI, I also noticed, so at the school where I teach, we use Canvas, and I noticed that students can push a button and it will summarize what I wrote.
Yeah.
And and they can listen to that. And I'm like, okay, so I don't know. I feel like there's skill sets that are not being practiced or used because of that. And so this is the reason why people are wanting simplified content or simplified, more easily accessible language. So I love the idea of this conference and I love the idea of this conversation, because it connects these ideas and these conversations to have. And yeah, I'm not even sure if I'm answering the question, but it tends to bother me when we start to see a society that's not appreciating scholarly work, I guess,
Yes.
Particularly in the administration that we're living in. And the fact that I think that a lot of people who voted for this administration don't see how the dots connect. They don't see how voting for that type of administration, even though I think that most people who supported this administration were voting for a particular thing, they don't see the other links and the other connections that supporting this particular administration and how it impacts them, as how it impacts everyone. When you defund research, you defund a whole lot of other things that impacts everyone. And I think it's a pushback to elitist, scholarly work that is still very needed.
Yeah, so it makes me think that there's such an important link between the academy and media when we think about translating science, communicating to the masses, if you will, the scientific, the actual evidence, I'm not going to say truth, the actual evidence about vaccines, for example. When people in leadership or people who are feeling anti-elite or against the intellectuals are feeling very deeply and strongly that they can't trust them, it seems to me like the media is a very important bridge between our speaking in tongues and what people are able to access, hear, and take in. And of course, I think that for journalists, the horror, I can even imagine the horror of reading literal fake news and what that does to everybody's credibility. It really, I'm going to say it takes us down a notch, which maybe we should be taken down a notch. I don't have a problem with that, but it just, I don't know, falsehoods just fly in the face of evidence. And it seems like one of the ways we can correct that boat is working together. One of the only things the School of Public Health I work with and for does is we have a what do you call it, a public like a media department staffed with 2 people who, I'm going to be honest, do a really poor job. I'm supposed to let them know when I've published something or done something, like come to a conference like this. I'll let them know I was here and what the content was. They might throw something up on Instagram like a month later that gets a few hits. It's just, I'm not sure what they're doing there. So that's when I feel like maybe it's just more up to me. But then, I mean, this is kind of the point of this conference. How do we do this? So.
Yeah. Just one comment, Sharon, on that. So, I mean, when I hear everybody talk, it reminds me of a criterion that's often included in proposals in the world of kind of development and international public health and so on. Like you write a proposal to try to achieve something, and they often ask you what your theory of social change is. And I think it's a useful. I mean, I find it a sort of annoying part of the proposals sometimes because, how much grasp of the people who are reading this proposal have about what a theory of social change might be. But I think it's I mean, as I've heard all of you talk, I mean, I would argue that I could, having heard your stories, I could tell you a version that may be semi-accurate, at least, of what your theory of social change is, based on what you've described, what you're doing with your careers, what you're doing in your work, and so on, whether you're in the media or whether you're in the academy. So I think it's a useful question, maybe not in those terms necessarily, but to ask ourselves. And to me, there's 2 parts of it. One part is like, if you do want to change the world, like how do you want to change it? And so be explicit about what that is. And then if you want to change it, what is your theory of social change? Like how do you go about that? I mean, if you want, let's just take the theme of this conference. If you want more democracy in an African society, and you're a scholar or a teacher or a media person, like, what are you doing that's going to make that happen? I mean, and in the media, like your audience matters. In the academy, your audience matters. But the means by which you do it is implicitly related to a theory of social change, even if you haven't articulated one. And I think being clear about that is important. The second thing I'll say is, and I don't know if it's true in the media as well, but in the academy, it's not all about social change, right? Like there's a big part of my mission as a teacher and as a scholar that, and I mean, certainly science, I would argue, shouldn't always be about social change, right? It has a value. I would argue it has a value in and of itself, even if it doesn't contribute to social change, because if it's all linked to a goal in social change, you're going to miss the whole lot of things that you might discover if you're only doing it in the service of your goal. It needs to be, the questions need to matter just as questions. They're exciting, they provoke curiosity and so on. And I guess I'm wondering, I assume there's something similar in the media too, where not every story, you're not doing every story because you want to change something, right? You're doing the story because you want to tell the truth. You want to shed light on things, and where it's going to go in terms of change, either you may not care or you certainly can't predict. And you would be maybe wrong-headed to imagine that the decision about whether to do the report or not hinges on whether it furthers the social change you want or not. It strikes me there's a similarity there with academia and science. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, Chair.
And probably before, Chair, just quickly, your second question on the partnership. So for Reuters, for example, they saw opportunity. And the opportunity was, I remember Reuters Oxford collaboration started with financial reporting for Africa. So they realized that in Africa, across Africa, newsrooms, they don't have the resources to follow money. Because if you want to hold your governments and your leaders to account in terms of corruption, corrupt practices, you have to follow the money. And that requires not just resources, but also expertise on investigating those things. So Reuters saw that gap and they capitalized on it and they invested in it. And some of Africa's currently the biggest investigative journalists following money, whose work became like, it resulted to change of policies in the country, are products of that. Then they came up with also climate journalism because they saw that there is a huge gap across newsrooms, not just in Africa, but also in Southeast Asia and other parts of the third world. I'm not sure exactly what but then I think if you want to consider this, look into this, first you have to make sure that you decide if it is going to target US journalists, African journalists, developing world, or everywhere in the world. And then it will have to be some of those issues, burning issues, because the idea is to get journalists, empower them with knowledge, with everything, and they go back and make impact. So those are the things probably you will need to consider.
This is a very interesting conversation. I have always been, preoccupied with this question of how the academy and the media can collaborate. And for me, it comes from a personal realization at an early age that, there has to be theory. I read somewhere, theory without practice would be meaningless, and practice without theory also could be blind. So I've always had that as a notion. So when I started journalism, my concern was, how do I ensure that what I write is informed by a specific worldview, the things I care about, the kind of society that I imagine, whether what I write will lead to that. But I felt, I have to have it a worldview, a theory, and then write about it, advocate for it, and also organize for that. So that's and then going back, this is what brought me to the academy. Like any other journalist, I started journalism away from being a high school dropout, and then slowly, by moving out and doing outreach, is what got me to the academy. To people here. When I started writing, I also realized I have to push my work to get to an audience. One was the local audience, communities that I organize, not just as a movement, but also as a community of conversation at the local level. And then I also realized that I have to reach out to the academy, and I started doing independent book tours. This is what got me into even putting my journalistic essays into a collection, a collected volume, not the kind of books that academics will write, but the kind of literature that I felt will allow me to have a conversation with Nwenna and also Professor Wallis. And that's how I met people across the academy. I did that for 10 years before becoming a student. It is one of those activities that got me to Northwestern. The academics who wrote letters for me never met me. I had 3 anthropologists who recommended me for a PhD program that I never met, but they've met my books. They were teaching my books, I realized, and some of them had invited me to come speak. And some of the events I could not make it because I was funding myself to go to these speaking events. I have to raise money or depend on friends who will buy me a ticket to go to a university environment to speak about the work that I care about, the things I write about, the conditions in Sierra Leone. So it was both writing, reporting about the conditions, but also advocating and building a community of conversation, a movement of people across the world that included all kinds of demographic populations, from uneducated people to semi-educated people, high school dropouts, university academics. So before coming to Northwestern, I had spoken to almost many universities in Europe. I was a guest speaker. If you look at what I call my CV, is a document of activities that I've done in being keynote speaker. While I was an undergraduate student, I never had a degree, but I was already speaking in many of these universities. So I had connections with academics across the world without my bachelor's degree. In fact, when I was an undergraduate student, nobody even knew that I was a student because I had spent more time traveling, speaking, and not funded by anyone, but by the community of people who I have built across the academy. That's how I got to Northwestern, and eventually for my bachelor's degree I applied. And Northwestern became the first place where I started earning what I call a conventional salary as the student stipend. My fellowship offered me a stipend. And that stipend was the stable income that I had. But for the most part, I lived off trading this literature because newspapers were no longer employing me in Sierra Leone. Even when they were not paying me, it was difficult to be attached to newspapers. I left that in 2005. The last position that I had was an editor of a newspaper, the Concord Times. And I had a story how I left. And then I decided that I could just build the Africanist Press. So I recount this story as a way of saying that audience is also key, but understanding the audience and how to reach that audience is, and this is why some of my colleagues consider me a non-conventional journalist, because I don't fit in that category of being just in the newsroom. I practiced pretty much what Professor Wallis says, a freelancer, but also somebody who was mindful of the fact that theory and practice are crucial. You cannot just organize a movement without having a worldview, a social theory of change, or a theory that guides the kind of society you imagine. Whether that's is a utopian society or realizable, that's a debate, But somehow it worked out for me in some ways. So I have a PhD, and the rest is now I would call history. So it's a story that I reflect on, but I call it sometimes an accident, a sea wave that perhaps swept me, but I decided how to create that boat and learned how to navigate the waves, as turbulent as it might be. But I got to places that I imagined I wanted to be. That is called in the academy agency. How do you utilize your agency in ways? And now I'm thinking about how do I make sure that that kind of what you call opportunity is also made available to other more brilliant and more talented people who might be, prevented from having access to the kind of people, the kind of networks that made it possible for me to accidentally land in the places that I have been. So on audience, I think, so recently I realized a challenge of an audience being in exile, for example. I can't reach the communities that I used to reach in an easy way. Now perhaps I had more resources, more education. I'm now in the academy, so it has become more difficult for me to reach my people that I've organized for more than 20 years, physically I mean, than when I never had the resources that I have now. So what are the forces that are militating against that? So it forced me to rethink my tactics and strategies of engagement and outreach. So this is what got me into podcasting. I was very hesitant in using my voice to the audiences that I have in West Africa, for example. Millions of people that I know are tied to our work. Because radio stations took the decision not to interview me in Sierra Leone, and I know why. They know I've been organizing the communities for a long time. So I was writing for an elite, the ruling class who were using my work to serve their interests. I knew they were exploiting my work. But I also had a strategy of saying that, okay, my work is part of a public education campaign. As a writer, I'm responsible for what I write. What people do with my writing, they teach it in the classroom, they decide to use it for their political campaign. It's upon them to use it, for some other purposes. So I'm not responsible for that. But voice was something I was careful about. I never wanted to speak without being present with the people because I don't want people to misuse my voice, to capitalize on it and do something else. So I never wanted to do a podcasting or to speak. I speak strategically. But when I realized that the elites have taken a decision that they can read my work, but they cannot spread it out to the public, they will not have a debate about it. It's a way of preventing my community of people that have organized, literate, semi-literate, people who could not read, not to have access to me. So from this distance, I then created a podcast. And I speak in the language that is accessible to them. Every Sunday, I release what I call Voice from Exile. And we started that in December 2023. Before we got into a year, that podcast has audience spread across 86 countries. And 42% of that audience is in Sierra Leone. So, which was made possible through WhatsApp and various other social media platforms. So now I receive attacks on all, but still, it's if we release an audio, within 24 hours, we have more than 2 million people listening, at least across the Mano River countries alone. And these are people who are on my phone here. I have 120,000 people that I can send to within the click of, and other people. And these are not people who post. Our WhatsApp groups are not people who post. They just sit there to receive. They are recipients of the message. And this is a community that we've built over years who know that we're absent on the ground, but they have to. In some ways, it's also causing its own change. So I'm just trying to put that out to say that the liberation of the instruments of mass communication have made it possible for us to do many things. We just have to figure out how to do it, and which is what this conversation is about. I'm also curious to see how we can simplify theory and make it, synchronize it with praxis in ways that will serve multiple audiences. Anyway.
Thank you, Cherno. I really like your courage, and you're a very, very brave journalist. And I think your example needs to be portrayed and shown internationally. And sometimes also, as we said, we have there are really, really a lot of examples and newsworthy examples we need to highlight to the world and to Africa in terms of examples. Kudos for that, for all what you have done up to now. And thanks to the panelists. Also, I would like just to add some of my 50 cents in the whole conversations, which is extraordinarily important and time-worthy also. I will begin with something which for us, for journalists, is always starting point is what drives the media work. What drives the media works is mostly if we have the news and if you have newspapers, TV, it is something which is newsworthy, sports stars, politics, scandals, sex, and things like that. Media, they are driving a lot of things about that. And if we come to the academics, what drive their works mostly, it's a lot of shedding light, to shed lights, analysis, very deep research, interesting papers, and so. And in between, there is also another thing. It is the media. It's today, here, right now. Just let us get out the story. The story is out. The academics, we are academics. We need to show the world that our work is extraordinarily serious. A lot of examples. It might take academics from the U.S., from Watson to to Gambia, or from Watson to Zimbabwe. You will have to travel. You will have to interview people. You will have to do this. And the media sometimes they don't have to wait. For example, and from my personal experience, I used to run a desk of education, science, and technology in around 2001, 2003, and one of our main problem was can we get a university specialist, for example, shed light on something. Anytime we call and they say, okay, tomorrow going to be the edition. We have to go to this newspaper to printing by midnight. Oh no, in French. No, you just. I mean, most of the time it is the journalist's reflex. You call by 8:30 p.m. Then the guy is probably still at the office or at home reading, writing something. No, yes, it is something on which I can shed light, but not now. Yes. And then people are waiting, editors and everyone are waiting. And these are some contrasts we have faced, journalists, media at large have faced everywhere for so long time. But that does not necessarily mean that there is a conflictual situation. It is, I mean, the agenda for so long has not been more or less the same. Academics, they are taking their time. They want something very strong to be published. It is a matter of reputation. It is a matter also because they have also their own peers. We have faced a lot of examples where, for example, you just request an interview to someone on X subject, for example. And then the most example I have personally faced was about, the judiciary. And then we gave the floor to a professor at that time. But the following day, when the paper went out, was published. The other one, the first one we requested, he just called to say, no, my fellow, there have been a lot of controversial things in what he has done. He is not, in fact, the very, very specialist of that. These are things people are also sometimes avoiding. But in any case, there is no conflictual arrangement situation. It is more a matter of agenda sometimes. But hopefully, in Africa, there are also many scholars and academics who are always really willing to give their point of view in a very timely way. And this is something also we journalists need to encourage and also develop. And in terms of solution, I stand by also with Sheriff in terms of solutions, for example, to have the major liaison officers role in the in universities, in big universities. I don't know, it was I was really, it was amazing yesterday, for example, to see that there is a podcast studio here somewhere, and I was there, and it was very nice. I think I was thinking maybe this might be something which in some university as African universities, producing from there also and giving to the media for broadcast. This is something which might be more and more explored. We have seen also some university radios in Africa, in some campuses. There are some radios, but unfortunately the outreach is very low. It is probably around half 50 kilometers, things like that. But it's good. These are initiatives to encourage. And I also think that the spread of think tanks, there are a lot of think tanks, for example, specialized in geography, thinking, very deep analysis. And so this needs to be open sometimes to journalists and strengthen the collaboration between the media and the academics world, so that people they can publish very regularly and have their word spread. And something also I have found is a lot of more and more academics, they are also using local languages. This is extraordinarily important. For example, we have seen that in Nigeria with the Hausa language, with a lot of academics, the university professors using Hausa to explain things. The same in the Great Lakes, for example, in the Great Lakes with Kiswahili language, with Wolof language, and so this is extraordinary, interesting, and I think this need to be improved and explored more. In a nutshell, it is quite fine. To have these interesting conversations, and I thank you all.
Thank you all. Very formative conversation. I think we as the Committee to Protect Journalists do see a really golden opportunity for the Academy to support journalists in exile in particular. If I would make a pitch, how do we take Brown from having Chernow to having 20 Chernows a year from now, 2 years from now? Journalists in exile who are coming from countries under distress, under challenges that have to do with authoritarianism and so on and so forth, really bring a very distinct perspective. Journalism as a profession, the mindset of a journalist really is a boundary crossing by nature. They dabble into so many areas. It's very firsthand. They have a lot of context. They understand a lot of perspectives all at once, whereas many academics, I know not all, tend to focus really deeply on one subject matter for a very long time. is there a future where the new school at Watson, let's say, embeds a journalist in exile or from one part of the globe or the other into each of their programs to pair them up with researchers or postdocs, stuff like, however you want to sort of construct it for that boundary exchange. And the number of journalists in exile now, from Africa, from elsewhere, really what we're seeing at CPJ, unprecedented. And the ascent of authoritarianism everywhere, they're running, and they're living in very hard circumstances. So it's not just from an altruistic perspective that, hey, big, nice, storied, well-funded American institution come in and support these people. No, actually, they do bring sort of material value to the scope of the research. And this is a setting where you're shaping future leaders, you're shaping opinions, and you're shaping minds in a very influential way. So I think I would just try to make that pitch, for Brown, for other big American universities, to take a look at journalists in exile, work with press freedom organizations like RSF, like CPJ, help us identify who are they, where they are. And I want to take it beyond just the journalism schools. It's not just, Medill does something. There are other journalism schools that do certain things on an anecdotal basis. It's really more widely than that. I think it brings a lot of unique perspective.
We also have William waiting.
All right, so just 1 minute. So I just wanted to say what we have been able to do in Gambia to work with academics, especially those in the University of the Gambia. At first, it was difficult to have these people on platforms. Serif and I worked on programs. We had this show called The Brunch. And when we initiated the show, we wanted to have experts. In our country, it was difficult to have experts on platforms. So it was just us talking about issues that we were not experts on. But when we started, we had people like Sid Matijao and Nima Kamara from the university, and they were bold enough to come and sit on platforms. We used local languages. So for them to be able to give their expertise in these local languages and get people to understand was a breaking point for us. So because when we bring politicians, they'll tell us anything and everything that they believe in. But when experts come and the community realize that these people are academics, they're working with facts. They give you research work. They talk about what they have worked on. So it was more of building confidence. So that was very helpful for us. So we were successful in having more people on platforms, on our different shows, and that really helped to build a lot of confidence around the work we do. So we have been partnering with lecturers from the UTG, and that was really helpful in having people consume the work we do, and we continue to do that. A lot of them do op-eds weekly. They write, and they send us their research work, and we publish. So that was really helpful for us and helped to also build a lot of confidence in our shows.
Thank you, Fatou. So William, we're coming to the end of our session, but I know you're waiting there patiently. We want you to have the last word.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to say that that conversation about, building collaboration between media and the academies is an interesting one. And we have had it a lot in Kenya and Africa. And I think more conversations need to be to take place around that. What I would like to say is that older universities in Africa have had a lot more bureaucracy in terms of dealing with the media or relating with communities or other structures. So you want to even getting journalists to interact with students at the universities, you will find that the approval levels and so on becomes extremely difficult. But I think in East Africa, for example, the University of Dar es Salaam started this interaction much earlier. And that is how, for example, if you look at what is remembered about the University of Dar es Salaam during especially under Tanzania, under Mwalimu Nyerere, the first president, it was more or less a citadel of academics relating with the public. And we had the likes of left-leaning academics from other countries who ran to Dar es Salaam. And we had the likes of Walter Rodney, the author of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, staying in Dar es Salaam, and sometimes they would have huge engagements with the rest of the public. Journalists would quote them very easily. They didn't have qualms about, the fears that we see with some academics about reputations and so on, because they were able to speak, very, very openly. In Kenya now, I saw our colleague from Sharif from the Gambia. In one of the pictures he brought out there, I saw one of the academics in Kenya, Professor Nyabuga, and I've just sent him, some snapshots from here, and he's very happy. What we have noticed is that academics who are, many of them, Nyabuga was in the media, was even a managing editor. And we also have Professor Nancy Buka and Davio Bonyo, many of the others. So you find that their level of interaction with the public spaces and the media becomes much easier. And now in Kenya, we have the Aga Khan University is increasingly having a concentration of academics and a mixture of people from academia and the media sector gelling together, and it has become more or less like the center for doing a lot of media work. So some of the academics are actually members of editors guilds, members of other professional, journalist professional organizations, and they attend conferences and speak very openly, and it becomes very easy to invite them even to talk shows on radio or on TV. So I think I would say that if we were to have a lot more conversation, perhaps it would ease the situation. I saw during COVID, one just final example, especially academics who are scientists are even much more afraid about reputation. And if we are talking about African academics around, especially who are scientists, there's the issue of peer review. If they say something, or their colleagues, they say, oh, you're making a claim that might not have been peer reviewed and that kind of thing. And we have that tragedy. I mean, during our student days, we used to talk about the tragedy of the post-independent African elite. We see a bit of that also because they are stuck in that past, and loosening a lot to try to engage is something I think is work in progress.
Thank you so much, William, and thank you to everybody. Before asking us to thank the panel, let me just say that I really appreciate these suggestions. And I always find that at conferences in the academy, there's a certain frustration because we contemplate and speak about and try to investigate and explore and examine all kinds of really important, complex issues. And then very often, the conference ends and we go away, and it's not like nothing happens because we all go back to our work, and many of you are doing vital, important, crucial work and pushing forward ideas and policies and programs and so on. But I really appreciate this ambition, and I would like to see us follow through on it to develop something concrete. And so Mohammed's idea, for example, Sadiba's ideas, for example, are really constructive. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I would like to keep the communications open between us here at Brown, with Cherno here at least for one more year, and you all as potential advisors in how we can construct something like this, whether it's journalists in exile who are affiliated with particular scholars, or whether it's some kind of new program that has people focused on trying to better imagine and engineer the collaboration between media and scholars. And I would say, just as a first pass, I mean, we did this under the auspices of the Africa Initiative. I think it's too ambitious to say we would do the whole world. I mean, let's start with Africa, right? Let's see what we can do at Brown in this regard. So. That said, I mean, these are tough things to do. I've listened to Cherno talk, and he's still doing all his investigative journalism. But if he wants to be situated in the academy, he has to publish his articles and get his book written and get a tenure track job and get tenure, right? So this is hard work to do, right? I mean, and for those of you who are in the media, to take the extra time to be involved with the academy, to collaborate with the academy, that's those hours that you're doing that are hours that you're not running down the latest story that you're publishing tomorrow, right? Yeah. So it involves a commitment, a sacrifice on everyone's part, but But I really like the idea of something concrete coming out of this conference to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully in the last session this afternoon, we can revisit some of these ideas. So thank you very much to the panelists.